The crystalline halls of the Zephyrian royal palace echoed with whispers as Captain Barris Chen stood before the assembled court. His human frame, scarred and weathered from the recent war, seemed impossibly small among the towering alien dignitaries. Yet every eye in the vast chamber was fixed upon him with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Emperor Vexthal, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the bioluminescent chandeliers, raised one of his 4 arms in acknowledgement. "Captain Barris Chen of Earth," his voice resonated through the translator implants. "You have saved not just our world but our entire system from the Void Swarm. Name your reward, and it shall be yours." The court held its collective breath. They had prepared for this moment. Chests of rare metals, advanced technologies beyond human comprehension, even territorial grants spanning entire moons. What they hadn't prepared for was the humans' response. Barris's eyes swept across the assembled royalty until they found her, Princess Melissa, standing in the shadows at the far edge of the gathering. While her sisters displayed the traditional Zephyrian beauty with their iridescent scales and graceful tentacle hair that moved like liquid silk, Melissa was different. Her scales were a dull gray-brown, her movements awkward, and her bioluminescent markings flickered weakly compared to the brilliant displays of her siblings. "I choose Princess Melissa as my companion," Barris said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the gasps, the hurried whispers, the barely concealed looks of shock and, in some cases, disgust. Princess Melissa herself seemed to shrink further into the shadows, her dim markings flickering with what Barris had learned to recognize as embarrassment among her species. Emperor Vexthal's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Captain, surely you are mistaken. Perhaps you meant Princess Velandra." He gestured toward the eldest daughter, whose scales shimmered like liquid gold. "Or Princess Nyxaria, known throughout the galaxy for her wisdom." "No, Your Majesty. I choose Melissa." The princess in question stepped forward, her movements jerky with nervous energy. "Human," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I am not what you think. I am the least of my father's daughters. My scales are dull, my song weak, my bioluminescence barely functional. I cannot even properly commune with the crystal networks that power our cities." "You could have anything, anyone, why would you choose me?" Barris smiled, the expression foreign but somehow comforting in this alien court. "Because, Princess, while your people see weakness, I see something they've missed entirely." He stepped closer, ignoring the scandalized gasps from the courtiers. 3 cycles ago, when the Void Swarm first appeared at the edge of your system, who was it that noticed the pattern in their movements? Who suggested they were following magnetic field lines? Melissa's weak markings flickered faster. That was just a theory. A theory that saved billions of lives. When our combined fleets were being decimated, who designed the harmonic frequency that disrupted their hive mind? Who figured out how to turn their own biotechnology against them? The princess looked around nervously as the court began to murmur. I merely suggested. You solved what our greatest military minds couldn't, what your own tactical advisors called impossible." Barris turned to address the Emperor directly. "Your Majesty, with respect, you've been looking at Princess Melissa through the lens of traditional Zephyrian values. You see her as weak because she doesn't fit your aesthetic ideals. But where I come from, we have a saying, still waters run deep." Emperor Vexthal's compound eyes fixed on his daughter with new interest. "Explain, human." "In the human military, we have a concept called quiet professionals. They're not the loudest or the flashiest, but they're the ones who get impossible things done. Princess Melissa spent the entire war in the research labs, not seeking glory or recognition, but finding solutions. While her sisters were attending state functions, she was working 18-hour cycles to save your people." Barris walked over to Melissa, whose markings were now pulsing in complex patterns that the court translator struggled to interpret, emotions too nuanced for simple translation. "You want to know why I choose her? Because I've fought alongside heroes, Princess, and I recognize one when I see one. Your people value beauty and traditional displays of power. Humans value something different. We value the person who stands up when everything seems lost, who finds a way when there is no way, who sacrifices their own comfort for the greater good." He held out his hand in the human gesture of partnership. "I choose you not despite your differences, but because of them. Because while your sisters learned how to shine in court, you learned how to think, While they perfected the art of politics, you mastered the science of survival. You're not the least of your father's daughters, Melissa. You're exactly what this galaxy needs." The princess stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was stronger than before. "You truly mean this? You would choose the Grey Princess over the Golden Ones?" "Every time," Barris replied without hesitation. Slowly, carefully, Princess Melissa reached out with one of her scaled hands and grasped his. The moment their skin touched, something remarkable happened. Her bioluminescent markings flared to life, brighter than they had ever been, creating patterns of light that seemed to dance across her scales like aurora across a night sky. The court gasped collectively. Emperor Vexithol rose from his throne, his own markings brightening with what Barris had learned to recognize as surprise and pride. "It seems," the Emperor said slowly, "that our human hero sees what we have been blind to. Very well, Captain Chen. If you believe my daughter is the greatest treasure in our realm, then perhaps it is time we saw her through your eyes." Princess Melissa looked up at Barris, her newly brilliant markings creating complex patterns of gratitude and wonder. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you see me differently?" Barris smiled. "Because humans have learned that the greatest strength often comes disguised as weakness, that the most valuable treasures are often the ones others overlook, and that sometimes the person everyone underestimates turns out to be exactly the hero the universe needs." As the court erupted in discussion and the Emperor called for a celebration, Barris and Melissa stood together, the scarred human soldier and the Grey Princess whose light had finally been allowed to shine. In choosing her, he had chosen not just a companion, but a future where worth was measured not by appearance or tradition, but by courage, intelligence, and the quiet strength that changes worlds. And in the cycles that followed, when historians wrote of the war against the Void Swarm, they would remember not just the human who saved the Zephyrian system, but the princess whose brilliance had made that salvation possible, and the choice that taught two species to see value where they had never looked before.